Previously, in preparation for the New York Custom Show, I worked on a handful of casino scales, and I also talked at great length about the importance of knife shows for me. Hey everyone, welcome to my workshop. I'm Anso, and today we're gonna grind on the blade, we're gonna do some hand finishing, and finally do all the assembly on my casino model. So this is episode 2. If you missed episode 1, you should go and watch it right now and then return to this episode.
Boom, shakalaka.
So this is a blade for my casino. At this point, the blade blank has been heat treated. We CNC milled, rough milled out the bevel. It looks pretty much done by now, and we've fine-tuned the process to a point where the grinding work that I'm doing right now is actually more a finishing kind of work. I still remove a little bit of material, but I actually start with a 220 grit belt, which most would consider pretty fine grit. What it gives me is it doesn't take away from the final product. It's still a handmade knife, but I reduce the amount of hours I have to put in behind the grinder, which allows me to sell this knife at a somewhat lower price, which for this specific model is one of the key goals. If you are familiar with grinding knives at all, you will actually see that this differs quite a bit from what you would normally see. Normally you would grind on a flat surface like on this platen here, or on a wheel like this. The casino blade is flat ground, and it is ground on this flat platen here, but the orientation of the blade is not perpendicular to the belt, but actually parallel to the belt, which is it's a little different. It allows me to make a faster grind and allows me to put the final finish on the blade a bit faster. This particular setup here is made by a Braid, and it's fitted to my standard fixture on my Anso Grindmaster 3000 here. The first objective is to remove all prior traces of the milling machine. If you look at this blade, you can see some of the marks and streaks left on the surface. So here I started removing those traces with the grinder. And the objective is to leave a completely smooth and uniform finish without any trace of the previous steps. So now I removed all the traces from the milling machine on a 220 grit belt. Next up is grinding the edges of the blade, chamfering all the edges before I put on the final grind finish here. After the grinding, I will continue to add a hand satin finish afterwards. Preparing for a knife show is the most favorite things that I know working in my shop, and that is because this gives me complete artistic freedom. I can pick exactly what I want to build, I can pick exactly how I want to build it, and if I suddenly feel inspired and want to try out something new, a new texture, a new surface finish, a new kind of patina, anything, I can do it on a showpiece. Going to a knife show and preparing for a knife show has always been somewhat of a conundrum for knife makers, in the fact that very often a knife maker will have a wait list, and with the wait list follows a number of months or even years of wait time along with that. If a knife maker only makes knives on order, that's great, but in order to stay relevant, You have to be in more than one place. You have to go out there, meet your customers. You need to allow people to handle your knives. You also need to have a day-to-day job where you build knives on order. You can do one thing or the other, or you can do both. In my world, it makes most sense if you both take orders and sell at a knife show. Next step is to go to the hardcore maximizer. I love that name. Maximizer. I'm gonna grind on all the edges of the blade that is not going to be sharp. I'm gonna polish up everything. I'm gonna chamfer the edges. I'm gonna start on a 220 grit belt and work myself up to a 320 grit. That will give me that final finish that will remove all previous steps from the CNC, and it will give a beautiful hand satin finish in the end. Next step is to put the hand satin finish on the blade. That means every single flat surface on the blade will get the satin finish. And I start out with the tang because in the end the tang will be hidden. I need the finish to be uniform all over the blade, even those places where you don't see it. But that's just me. I make this for myself first and foremost, so I need to know that every single place that you will look at the knife, even if it's taken apart, looks good. So the blade is positioned in this multi-position vise called red E-hand, which is just super cool. And every single shop needs some kind of vise, several vices. And in my opinion, every shop needs a multi-position vise for sure. So now the tang of the blade has the final finish, and in order to protect that, in the next step where I flip the blade and hold the blade by its tang, I'm gonna protect the surface with masking tape. If you want to support this channel, you can visit my website right now and order your Aros. We're at a point in the build now where, of course, I had to go nulling a little bit with all the parts. Everything is ready to assemble. What we established in the previous steps was getting the hand satin finish on the blade. On all my custom knives, I diamond engraved the logo into the steel here. It's a artificial diamond that is dragged across the surface and actually digs into the steel. And it gives a super crisp and very fine looking logo here. Next step is to bend the springs. The Casino doesn't have a lock per se, but is more a traditional, speaking, a slip joint. This is a more modern version of it. It's a double detent slip joint. So on each side of the blade rides a liner with a detent in it. And now we're gonna bend the liner here. I've said it before on this channel, there's no temporary solutions. And this actually goes to show, this is a little distant block that I use in my vise to set the liner at the exact height. It's a piece of Dall and a piece of G10 put together with a little masking tape for that exact height, and I probably made close to 1,000 knives using this block. So while it's definitely not pretty, it serves the purpose, and one day I might make a permanent solution for this temporary solution. But it lasted me a good 10 years by now, and even though it looks like Well, I don't even know how to describe it. This is what I use. Now I put the liner into the vise at a given height, and then I use this super high-end piece of wood to bend the titanium. Again, one of those temporary solutions that just became permanent. This set of pliers here, it's an electrician plier or something for stripping cable. I got this, I believe, in my 18th birthday as part of a set, and this is the only piece of that set that survived. I would like to replace it with a proper quality one because this is really, really cheap, but it serves a function, and that is specifically to hold onto round objects, specifically the pivot barrel here. And I haven't found any tools that does this as good as this one. If you know where I can get a proper one of these, please let me know. I haven't been able to find one in the past 20 years of searching, but maybe you do. One of the things about a modern type slip joint like this one is that everything is put together with screws. If this had been a traditional old school slip joint, everything would have been put together with a hammer, and you have one shot to do that. And I can just say I have a tremendous amount of respect for any knife maker out there who makes traditional slip joints, who rivet everything together, because it's so unforgiving. Here, if I mess something up, I can take it apart, replace a part, put it back together. But with a hammer, I don't even want to think about going there. And there you have it. The first knife being assembled for this forthcoming show. Now we only need to do the final sharpening and test the sharpness, and it's done. This part of knife making is something that I've always had an enormous respect for. And it's really a matter of, now you have a 99.9% completed knife, and you're putting it on a belt grinder to put the final edge on it. This is a perfect opportunity to screw everything up and just throw the knife away, because this is definitely what you can do here. It's almost 5 in the afternoon. It's definitely not something that is the ideal situation. Often I will wait until the next day. This is usually something I do in the morning when I'm fresh and everything is quiet in here. I close the door, I turn off my phone and just be super focused. But let's see if I can avoid messing things up here. And it actually turned out quite all right. I've done this not just 1,000 of times, but several thousand times, and it still makes me just a little bit anxious, just because it's so easy to mess things up and just ruin everything that you've worked so hard to achieve up until this point. So keeping a steady hand and a cool mind is just crucial for this. That was the initial edge set on the belt grinder, and next is the final honing of that edge. After the initial edge has been set on the belt grinder, we now reach the point where everything beyond this is something where the end user will also be able to re-establish whatever I've been doing here. So that is one of the reasons why I've chose the Spyderco Sharp Maker, because that's a relatively cheap investment for any knife users out there. And rather than leaving for instance, a polished edge, I will stone the blade on the ceramic stones here, and that will give me the final edge, and it's something that my customers can do the exact same thing to copy the same procedure as I do. I find that extremely important, that a knife being a tool that is meant to be used, and you as a customer can do the exact same procedure as I do. Rather than trying to establish something that is close, you can actually get the same equipment that I'm using to get the same sharp edge on your knife. And now the last thing that is needed is I'm stropping the edge on a leather strap here that is loaded with some polishing compound. Stropping the knife and then do the final cleaning of the blade, and we're done. And last step on every single knife that I sharpen is to test it on paper. This does two things. One thing is it tells me a lot about the condition of the edge, and it allows me to detect if there's a flat spot on the edge anywhere, but this seems to be good to go. This is the Casino, and that will be on my table at the NYCKS. If you enjoyed this episode, please visit my website. There's a link below. On the site you can find cool projects like the Aros. If you order one of these, you'll help keep the light on. Please remember to hit like and subscribe. Leave me a comment if you have questions for this episode. And until next time, see you later.